The air at the edge of the world is thin, sharp enough to cut the lungs, and carries the scent of ancient, frozen dust. High in the mountains where the clouds are nothing more than a memory of moisture, the stone underfoot feels different. It does not crumble like the sandstone of the valleys or break with the jagged edges of common granite. It feels dense, heavy with a weight that is not just physical but chronological. If you press your hand against the cold surface, you might feel a faint vibration, a hum that vibrates through your bones. Most would call it the wind. Others might call it the natural resonance of the earth. But there is a suspicion, growing in the quiet corners of the mind, that this is the muffled heartbeat of something buried so deep that time itself has forgotten its name. We look at our cities today, the glass towers that pierce the sky, the concrete arteries pulsing with electricity, the digital webs that wrap the globe in a flicker of light, and we assume this is the pinnacle. We believe we are the first to climb this high. We see the history of our species as a straight line, a steady ascent from the mud to the stars. But the earth does not move in straight lines. The earth moves in circles. It breathes in and breathes out, and with every breath it clears the table. It grinds the mountains into sand and pulls the seabed into the burning heart of the mantle. It is a massive, silent machine of erasure, designed to turn everything we build back into the dust from which it came. Imagine a world 10 times older than our current memory. Imagine a civilization that did not use plastic or steel, but instead mastered the very frequencies of the planet. They did not leave behind rusting cars or rotting skyscrapers. They built with the grain of the earth, using the resonance of the stone and the flow of the tides. When they were gone, they did not leave a scar. They left an echo. We are walking on the roof of a graveyard that spans 1 billion years, and we are only now beginning to realize that we are not the masters of this house. We are simply the latest tenants, moving into a room that has been scrubbed clean 4 times before. The problem is not a lack of evidence. The problem is the scale of the erasure. We measure time in centuries and millennia, but the earth measures time in eons. To the planet, 1 million years is a blink. 100 million years is a season. In that span of time, the rain will dissolve the hardest marble. The wind will sand down the tallest pyramid. The shifting of the tectonic plates will drag entire continents into the fire of the core, melting the steel and the glass and the bone until they are nothing but molten rock. What we are looking for is not a ruin. We are looking for a ghost, a signature written in the chemistry of the soil, a pattern in the way the mountains are shaped, a memory held in the very DNA of the life that survived. If we were to vanish tomorrow, how long would it take for the earth to swallow us? Within a century, the forests would claim the streets. Within 1,000 years, the steel skeletons of our cities would crumble into orange dust. Within 10,000 years, the only thing left would be the faint outline of our foundations, buried under layers of silt and mud. After 1 million years, a geological heartbeat, there would be nothing. No satellites in the sky, no plastic in the ocean, no bones in the ground. The earth is a perfect recycler. It does not like to keep secrets. It prefers to start fresh, washing the slate with ice and fire until the past is nothing more than a whisper in the wind. But there are anomalies. There are moments when the machine of erasure slips. There are pockets of the deep past that refuse to stay buried. In the deep layers of coal, where the world of 300 million years ago is pressed into black stone, miners have found objects that should not exist. Not tools of wood or bone, but intricate gears of metal, finished with a precision that defies the primitive tools of our known ancestors. These are not mistakes of nature. They are the artifacts of the 4th civilization, or perhaps the 3rd, caught in the press of deep time before they could be fully dissolved. Think of the ground beneath your feet as a series of pages in a book. Most of the pages have been torn out and burned. Some have been soaked in water until the ink has run into a gray blur. But every now and then you find a word. A single, clear word that tells you the story was much longer and much more complex than you were ever taught. We are the fifth civilization to rise from the mud, and we are standing on the ruins of giants who didn't just build cities, but shaped the very world we now inhabit. The earth is heavy. It is a weight that presses down on everything we know, a constant slow-motion crush that turns history into geology. When we talk about the past, we usually think of a few thousand years, the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians. We think of stone blocks and clay pots, but that is just the top layer of the skin. Beneath that is a mile of rock, and beneath that another mile and another. Each layer is a world that lived, breathed, and died. Each layer represents a span of time so vast that our entire recorded history would not even be a single grain of sand on a beach 100 miles long. The stakes of this investigation are not just historical. They are existential. If we are the fifth, what happened to the four who came before us? Did they reach the stars and leave us behind? Did they collapse under the weight of their own ambition? Or did the earth simply decide that their time was up and shake them off like dust from a coat? The silence of the deep past is not an empty silence. It is a crowded one, filled with the ghosts of cities that were more beautiful than ours, and technologies that we are only now beginning to rediscover. To understand the scale of the erasure, you have to look at the mountains. We see them as eternal, the very definition of permanence. But to the earth, the mountains are like waves on the ocean. They rise up, they peak, and they break. The Himalayas, the Alps, the Andes, they are all temporary features on a shifting face. The earth breathes, and as it does, the crust buckles and folds. It takes the floor of the sea and pushes it 3 miles into the air, where the wind and the ice begin their work of tearing it back down. This is the great grind. It is a process that never stops, a relentless mechanical force that turns empires into sediment. The first clue that we are not alone in the timeline is not found in a museum, but in the chemistry of the deep earth. In certain layers of rock, dated back hundreds of millions of years, there are strange spikes in carbon and oxygen. These are not natural spikes. They look like the signatures of an industrial age. A sudden, violent burst of activity that lasted for a few thousand years and then vanished. It is a chemical scar, a mark left by a civilization that burned through the resources of the planet just as we are doing now. They didn't leave behind buildings because the mountains they built upon are gone. They didn't leave behind books because the paper turned to dust and the dust turned to stone. They left a signal in the air, a whisper in the isotopes that survived the grinding of the plates. Imagine the atmosphere as a witness. It remembers the smoke of every fire, the exhaust of every engine, the breath of every living thing. And the rocks remember the atmosphere. As the sediment falls to the bottom of the sea, it traps the air of that time in tiny bubbles or preserves the chemical balance in the minerals. When we drill deep into the earth, we are reading the journal of the planet. And that journal tells us of periods where the temperature spiked, where the oceans turned acidic, where the life of the world was pushed to the brink. We are taught that these were natural disasters, volcanoes or asteroids. But the data shows something different. It shows a precision, a suddenness that looks far more like the hand of a global civilization. We look for ruins on the surface, but the surface is a liar. The surface is where the wind and the rain do their work. If you want to find the truth, you have to go where the earth hides its secrets. You have to go to the deep trenches of the ocean, or the heart of the great deserts, or the places where the crust is thick and old. There, the erasure is slower. There, the ghosts are more likely to linger. Consider the texture of the stone in the high places. There are blocks of granite in the mountains of South America and the plains of Egypt that are so large, so perfectly cut, that they seem to defy the laws of physics. We are told they were moved by thousands of slaves with ropes and wooden rollers. but wood snaps under that kind of weight. Ropes fray and break. When you look at the way these stones fit together, without mortar, without a gap thin enough to slide a hair through, you aren't looking at the work of a primitive culture. You are looking at the remnants of a lost physics. This is the paradox of the deep past. We find things that are too advanced for the time they belong to, and because they don't fit our story, we ignore them. We call them anomalies. We call them mysteries. But an anomaly is just a fact that we haven't found a place for yet. These stones are the bones of the fourth civilization. They built with the weight of the world, using the very gravity that usually destroys, and turned it into a foundation. They knew that the earth would try to erase them, so they built with the only thing that lasts, the living rock of the planet itself. Skeptics will tell you that if there were a global civilization before us, we would find their trash. We would find the mines where they took their metal, the landfills where they threw their waste. But they are thinking in human time, not deep time. A mine that was dug 200 million years ago has been filled, crushed, and turned back into solid rock long ago. A landfill from the age of the dinosaurs would be nothing more than a thin layer of strange chemicals in a cliffside, indistinguishable from natural mineral deposits to the untrained eye. The earth does not just bury the past, it digests it. It takes the complex molecules of our world and breaks them down into their basic elements, turns steel back into iron or turns plastic back into oil. It turns our greatest monuments into the silt at the bottom of a river. We find no trash because the earth is a clean eater. It leaves no scraps behind. But the rebuttal is found in the things that cannot be digested. There are certain elements, certain isotopes, that do not occur naturally in the quantities we find them. There are patterns in the placement of ancient structures that align with stars as they were positioned 100,000 years ago, not as they are today. There are maps that show the coastlines of Antarctica as they appeared before the ice millions of years in the past. These are the footprints of a ghost. They are the evidence of a mind that was watching the world long before we ever learned to walk upright. Think about the maps. We have maps from the Middle Ages that show the world with startling accuracy, including lands that were not supposed to be discovered for centuries. These were not the work of explorers in wooden ships. They were copies of copies of copies, reaching back into a time when the world was mapped from the sky. The lines are too precise, the geometry too advanced. They show the world as a single, connected whole, a perspective that only a global civilization could possess. They are the echoes of the third civilization, the masters of the air and the sea, whose maps survived the fire and the flood even as their cities turned to sand. The fourth investigation takes us into the very core of our own being. If the earth erases the stone and the steel, where else could a civilization leave its mark? The answer is in the code. DNA is the most sophisticated storage device in the known universe. It is a language, a set of instructions that has been passed down for billions of years. And within that code, there are sections that we do not understand. We call it junk DNA, the leftovers of evolution. But what if it isn't junk? What if it is a message? There are sequences in our genetic map that are so stable, so resistant to mutation, that they have remained unchanged for millions of years. They don't seem to code for anything physical. They don't build a heart or an eye. They just sit there, a silent sequence of information. Some believe these are the markers of the second civilization, a culture that mastered the biological world and wrote their history into the very cells of the creatures that would follow them. We are not just walking on their ruins. We are carrying their library inside our own bodies. Imagine a world where the primary technology was not mechanical but genetic, where they didn't build machines to move the earth, but grew them, where they didn't use wires to communicate, but used the resonance of the nervous system. When such a civilization falls, they leave no rusted engines or broken glass. They leave only the life that continues to thrive, carrying the hidden blueprints of a lost era. The strange, sudden jumps in human evolution, the moments where our brains doubled in size for no apparent reason, these are not accidents. They are the moments where the old code was activated, where the fifth civilization was given the tools to begin its own climb. As we move deeper into the story, the atmosphere of the world begins to change. The wind feels heavier, as if it is carrying the voices of 1 billion people who lived and died before the first pharaoh was born. The earth beneath us is not a solid thing. It is a shifting, living museum. We are standing on a layer of dust that was once a city of light. We are drinking water that once flowed through the fountains of a palace that makes the Taj Mahal look like a child's toy. The scale of what has been lost is so vast that it can only be felt in the silence of the deep woods or the emptiness of the desert. The unifying theory of the 5 civilizations is not one of tragedy, but of cycles. The earth is not a cruel judge. It is a gardener, prunes the world to make room for new growth. Each civilization is a season. The first was the age of the foundation, the ones who set the patterns of the crust and the tide. The second was the age of the breath, the masters of life and code. The third was the age of the horizon, the explorers of the air and the stars. The fourth was the age of the weight, the architects of the stone and the gravity. And we are the fifth, the age of the spark. We are the ones who use the fire of the earth to light the dark, unaware that we are burning the very fuel that the previous seasons left behind. We look at our coal and our oil as natural resources, but what if they are the compressed remains of the 3rd and 4th civilizations? What if our entire industrial age is powered by the literal bodies of the empires that came before us? It is a sobering thought. We are climbing toward our own sunset by consuming the ghosts of those who already saw theirs. The earth is not creating new energy. It is simply passing the torch from one dying hand to the next. The climax of this realization comes when we look at the pace of our own world. We are moving faster than any civilization before us. We are changing the atmosphere, the oceans, and the climate in a matter of decades. We are creating a signal that will be visible in the rocks for 100 million years. We are making sure that the 6th civilization, when it eventually rises from our dust, will have no doubt that we were here. But in doing so, we are accelerating the arrival of the eraser. The earth does not like a civilization that moves too fast, prefers the slow, steady rhythm of the seasons. When the balance is tipped, the planet breathes out, and the slate is washed clean once again. The evidence is all around us if we know how to see it. It is in the way the light hits the ancient stones at dawn, revealing the faint marks of tools that should not have existed. It is in the strange, rhythmic pulses detected by sensors deep in the crust, echoing the movements of ancient machinery that still hasn't quite stopped. It is in the dreams of a world we have never seen, a world of floating cities and silent gardens that haunt our collective memory. We are the 5th civilization, but we are not the last. And we are certainly not the first. The importance of this understanding is not just about the past. It is about how we live today. We think of ourselves as permanent, as the end of the story. But if we are part of a cycle, then our time is finite. The cities we build, the languages we speak, the people we love, they are all part of a beautiful temporary flicker in the long night of deep time. This should not bring despair, but a profound sense of connection. We are part of a lineage that stretches back to the cooling of the crust. We are carrying the fire that was lit by the first civilization, and it is our job to keep it burning for as long as we can before the sun sets on our era. As you walk through the world, look at the ground. Don't see it as just dirt or rock. See it as a library. See it as a graveyard. See it as a promise. The earth remembers everything. It hides its secrets in the deep places, waiting for someone to be quiet enough to hear them. We are the 5th, and the evidence of those who came before is etched into the very grain of reality. It was almost erased, but not quite. The echo remains. If you have felt the weight of these words, if you have sensed the hum of the deep earth, then you are already beginning to remember. The story of the forgotten earth is not just about what was lost, but about what remains. We are the guardians of the fifth sunset. Let us look at the stars and the stones with new eyes, knowing that we are never truly alone. The past is not gone. It is simply waiting beneath our feet. Join us as we continue to peel back the layers of the world. There are more stories to tell, more ghosts to find, and more secrets to uncover in the deep time of our planet. Subscribe to The Forgotten Earth and become a witness to the cycles of the world. The fire is still burning. The story is not over. The silence of the deep earth is not like the silence of a room. It is a thick, heavy thing that presses against the eardrums, a silence that has been brewing for millions of years under the weight of 1 billion tons of rock. When you descend into a deep strata coal mine, you are not just traveling through distance. You are traveling through the physical manifestation of time. The walls are made of ancient forests, once vibrant and green, now compressed into a black, glassy substance that stains the skin and fills the lungs with the scent of a world that died before the first dinosaur was born. It is here, in this pressurized darkness, that the first cracks in our version of history began to appear. In the late 19th century, and again in the middle of the 20th, miners working in these deep seams found something that the Earth had failed to fully digest. It was a small object, no larger than a human fist, encased in a block of coal that had been formed 300 million years ago. When the coal was broken open, there was no sign of a fissure or a hole where the object could have fallen in recently. It was part of the rock itself. It was a small metallic cup, or perhaps a gear, made of an alloy that should not have existed in nature. The surface was finished with a smoothness that suggested a lathe or a precision mold. The edges were sharp, the geometry perfect. To look at such an object is to feel a sudden, jarring sense of vertigo. It is a paradox made of metal. According to the standard timeline, 300 million years ago, the only life on land was primitive amphibians and giant insects. There were no hands to forge metal. There were no minds to conceive of a gear. There was only the wet, humid heat of the Carboniferous swamps. And yet, there it is, a piece of high technology, cold and unyielding, pulled from the heart of a mountain. The paradox is the friction between what we see and what we are allowed to believe. If we accept the object as real, we have to throw away everything we know about the history of the world. We have to admit that a civilization existed, thrived, and achieved technological mastery in a time so remote that the continents were still joined together in a single mass. We have to admit that they were here, and then they were gone, leaving only a few scraps of metal trapped in the coal. The skeptics, of course, have an answer. They speak of concretions, natural mineral formations that can sometimes take on regular, geometric shapes. They talk about iron-rich water seeping through cracks and depositing metal in a way that mimics a man-made object. They point to the possibility of hoaxes or of objects falling into the coal during the mining process. It is a comforting explanation, keeps the timeline clean. It allows us to go back to sleep, believing that we are the first and only masters of the earth. But when you hold the rebuttal in your hand, the skeptical argument begins to feel thin. Natural concretions do not have internal gears. They do not have threads. They are not made of purified alloys that require temperatures of thousands of degrees to create. When these objects are subjected to chemical analysis, they often reveal a composition that is unlike anything we use today, ratios of magnesium and aluminum that are highly specialized, or traces of rare earth elements that are difficult to refine even with our modern furnaces. These are not the accidents of nature. They are the artifacts of an industry that has been forgotten. Consider the texture of the coal once more. It is the remains of a global ecosystem that was wiped out in a series of catastrophic shifts. If that civilization lived in the era of the Great Swamps, their cities would have been built on soft ground, near the water. When the world changed, when the tides rose and the earth buckled, those cities would have been swallowed whole. They would have been dragged down into the muck, covered by miles of sediment, and subjected to the intense heat and pressure that turns wood into coal. The metal would have survived longer than the stone or the bone, but even the metal would eventually dissolve or be crushed beyond recognition. What we find are the 1 in a billion survivors, the lucky scraps that happen to be encased in a pocket of gas or a protective mineral shell before the earth could finish its work. The first civilization, the one that left its mark in the coal, was perhaps the most alien to us. They lived in a world with a different atmosphere, a different gravity, and a different rhythm. Their technology would have been adapted to a planet that was younger and more volatile. Perhaps they didn't use electricity as we do. Perhaps they harnessed the chemical energy of the massive flora that covered the earth. Their legacy is not one of monuments, but of chemistry. They changed the composition of the atmosphere, leaving a spike in the geological record that we mistake for a natural volcanic event. They were the masters of the green world, and when the green world died, they died with it. From the deep black of the coal mines, we move to the high, cold plateaus of the Andes. Here, the air is so thin that the sky looks a darker shade of blue, and the silence is broken only by the thin whistle of the wind through the tall grass. This is the domain of the fourth civilization, the builders. When you stand before the walls of Sacsayhuaman or the foundations of Tiwanaku, you are looking at a mystery that scales upward until it becomes overwhelming. These are not just walls. They are puzzles made of stone, where individual blocks weigh over 100 tons. They are not square or uniform. They are multifaceted, with 12 or 13 corners, each one fitting perfectly into the next like a giant, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. There is no mortar. There is no cement. There is only the weight of the stone and a fit so precise that you cannot slide a razor blade between the blocks. The paradox here is one of engineering. We are told that these stones were shaped by people using stone hammers and bronze chisels. But the rock is andesite and granite, among the hardest stones on earth. Bronze is soft. It would blunt and break against the first inch of the surface. To shape a 100-ton block with such precision would take a lifetime of manual labor for a single stone. And yet, there are thousands of them. Some of these stones were quarried from mountains miles away, across deep valleys and over rugged terrain. How were they moved? How were they lifted? How were they carved with such impossible accuracy? The skepticism is predictable. We are told of massive ramps, of thousands of workers pulling on ropes, of decades of patient chipping. We are shown small-scale experiments where a few people move a 1-ton block a few inches and are told that this explains everything. But a 1-ton block is not a 100-ton block. The physics of weight does not scale linearly. At a certain point, the wooden rollers are crushed into splinters. At a certain point, the ropes snap. At a certain point, the sheer number of people required to pull the load becomes so large that they cannot even stand in the same valley. The rebuttal is written in the stone itself. If you look closely at the surface of some of these blocks, you see something strange. You see marks that look like they were made while the stone was soft, vitrified surfaces that look like glass, or indentations that look like they were pressed into the rock as if it were clay. There are places where the stone seems to have been melted and poured into place, or where a high-frequency vibration was used to cut through the hard mineral grain as if it were butter. This was the fourth civilization, the masters of the weight. They did not fight against gravity. They understood it. They knew that stone is not a dead, solid thing, but a collection of frequencies. If you find the right resonance, the stone becomes light. If you apply the right heat, the stone becomes plastic. They built their world to last forever, choosing the most durable materials and the most stable geometries. They knew the eraser was coming. They knew the earth would try to shake them off. So they tied their cities to the bones of the planet. Imagine the atmosphere of that time. A world where the mountains were being shaped by the hands of architects. A world where the sound of the cities was not the roar of engines, but a low, harmonic hum that kept the stones in place. They were a civilization of permanence, of stillness. They didn't need to move fast because they were building for eternity. But even eternity has an end on a planet with a moving crust. The very mountains they built upon were shifted by the tectonic plates. The foundations were cracked by the rising and falling of the land. The fourth civilization didn't disappear because they failed. They disappeared because the earth itself changed its shape. Beneath the stone foundations of the fourth, we find the traces of the third, the civilization of the horizon. These were the ones who saw the world as a single, interconnected map. We find their evidence in the places where the maps of the old world refuse to align with the history we are taught. The Piri Reis map, the Orance Fine map, the maps of the ancient sea kings, these are documents that show the world with a perspective that should have been impossible. They show the coastlines of the Americas before they were discovered. They show the mountains of Antarctica not as they look now under 2 miles of ice, but as they look when the ice is gone. This is the paradox. For Antarctica to be mapped without ice, the mapping had to happen at least 6,000 years ago, and likely much further back into the deep time of the last interglacial period. Who was sailing the oceans when the rest of humanity was supposed to be living in caves? Who had the mathematics to project a spherical Earth onto a flat surface with such accuracy that it rivals modern satellite surveys? These were the people of the third civilization. They were the masters of the sea and the stars. They lived in an age of exploration and global trade that makes our modern world look like a series of isolated villages. Skeptics argue that these maps are just lucky guesses, or that the Antarctica they show is actually just a distorted version of South America. They say that ancient sailors were much more capable than we give them credit for, but they stop short of admitting a global civilization. They prefer to think of it as a series of accidental discoveries, lost and then found again. But a map is not an accident. A map is a high-level abstraction of data. To create a map of a continent, you need a standard of measurement. You need a way to determine longitude, a problem that our own civilization didn't solve until the 18th century. You need a centralized system of record-keeping. The maps we have are the fragmented remains of a global library. They are the shadows of a world that was connected by air and sea. A world that knew the exact shape and size of the planet long before the first pyramid was ever dreamed of. The third civilization was a culture of movement. They didn't build heavy stone walls. They built networks. They left their mark in the way the plants and animals are distributed across the continents. Why are there coconuts in the Americas and the South Pacific? Why are there similarities in the DNA of people living on opposite sides of the world's widest oceans? This was not the work of drifting logs or accidental voyages. This was the work of a civilization that treated the planet as a single garden, moving life from one place to another to suit their needs. When the end came for the third civilization, it was likely sudden. A world of networks is a fragile world. If the seas rise or the climate shifts, the connections break. The global trade stops. The specialized knowledge is lost. Within a generation, the people who could map the stars are struggling to find enough to eat. Within 1,000 years, their ships have rotted and their maps have been copied into myths and legends. They left behind no ruins because their world was built of wood, fabric, and information, the most perishable materials of all. Now, we move into the strangest territory of all. The traces of the second civilization, the ones who lived in the breath of the world. This is the investigation of the biological. If you look at the history of life on Earth, there are moments that don't make sense. There are explosions of diversity where complex forms appear out of nowhere, with no clear ancestors in the fossil record. There are the sudden, massive leaps in the capability of the human brain. We are taught to call this evolution, a slow process of trial and error. But evolution usually moves at a crawl. These moments were sprints. The paradox is found in the complexity of the cell. We are finding that the simplest bacteria are more complex than any machine we have ever built. They contain literal motors, rotary engines that spin at thousands of revolutions per minute. They have data storage systems and error correction protocols. To believe that this happened purely by chance is like believing that a hurricane could blow through a junkyard and assemble a functioning Boeing 747. The second civilization did not use metal or stone. They used life. They were the masters of the genetic code, the architects of the biosphere. They didn't build a city. They grew one. They didn't create a computer. They engineered a nervous system. The junk DNA that makes up the vast majority of our genome is not trash. It is a dormant library of functions and memories that we are only now beginning to tap into. Skeptics will say that this is moving into the realm of the impossible. They will argue that life is a natural process and that we don't need engineers to explain it. They point to the vast stretches of time and the power of natural selection. And they are right to a point. Natural selection is real, but natural selection is a filter, not a creator. It explains how the weak are removed, but it doesn't explain how the complex is initiated. The rebuttal is found in the anomalous life forms that shouldn't exist. Creatures like the octopus with a nervous system and a genetic makeup so different from anything else on the planet that some scientists have jokingly called them extraterrestrial. Or the tardigrade, which can survive the vacuum of space and the heat of a volcano. These are not the products of a slow, local evolution. They are the specialized tools of a civilization that was experimenting with the limits of what life can do. The second civilization lived in a world where the boundary between the natural and the artificial didn't exist. Every tree was a power plant. Every animal was a specialized worker. The very air was thick with the information they were transmitting. They didn't leave a mark on the earth because they were the mark. They transformed the planet into a living, breathing machine. When they passed, they didn't leave ruins. They left us. We are the descendants of their biological experiments, the heirs to a genetic fortune that we are only just beginning to spend. This is the cycle. The Earth is a series of layers, each one representing a different way of being, a different solution to the problem of existence. The first civilization used the chemical energy of the young Earth. The second used the power of life and code. The third used the geometry of the stars and the sea. The fourth used the resonance of the stone and gravity. And we, the fifth, used the spark of fire and the flow of electrons. Every time a civilization reaches its peak, it begins to feel a sense of permanence. We think we have solved the puzzle. We think we have finally mastered the Earth. But the Earth is always watching. It is always waiting for the moment when the balance tips too far. Think of the Great Oxidation Event of 2 billion years ago. The Earth's atmosphere was suddenly flooded with oxygen, a toxic gas that killed almost everything living at the time. We are told this was caused by simple algae. But what if it was the industrial waste of a civilization we can't even imagine? What if the snowball Earth periods, where the entire planet was covered in ice for millions of years, were the planet's way of resetting the thermostat after a civilization burned too bright? The erasure is not an accident. It is a function. The Earth is a self-regulating system that maintains the conditions for life by periodically clearing the stage. It takes the carbon, the silicon, the iron, and the gold, and it pulls them back into the mantle. It grinds the records of the past into the mud of the future. We are standing on the surface of a world that has been recycled over and over again, and we are only seeing the very last thin layer of the story. As you sit in the quiet of your own world, think about the objects around you. Your phone, your car, the foundations of your house. In 10,000 years, they will be gone. In 1,000,000 years, the very ground they stand on will be gone. The only thing that might survive is the way you have changed the chemistry of the air, or the way you have altered the code of a plant in your garden. You are part of a lineage of ghosts. You are a citizen of the fifth sunset, and the shadows are already starting to lengthen. The mystery of the forgotten Earth is not a question of if they existed, but how many times the cycle can repeat before the planet itself grows too old to start again. We are living in a precious window of time, a period of stability that has allowed us to flourish. But the stability is an illusion. The crust is moving. The poles are shifting. The sun is changing. We are part of a long, beautiful, and terrifying sequence of rise and fall. The deep time of the earth is a weight that we all carry. It is the feeling of insignificance when you look at the stars, or the feeling of awe when you stand at the edge of a canyon. It is the realization that the world does not belong to us. We are just passing through, using the tools that the previous civilizations left behind, unaware that we are following a script that was written 1,000,000,000 years ago. The stone is cold, the air is thin, the silence is heavy, but if you listen, you can hear the heartbeat. It's the sound of the machine of erasure, turning the wheels of time, preparing the ground for the sixth civilization. And in the meantime, we are here. We are the ones who can look at the anomalies, who can see the paradoxes, and who can begin to piece together the true history of our home. Stay with us as we descend further into the layers of the past. There is more to see in the darkness. There are more words to read in the stone. We are the fifth, and we are finally starting to wake up. The earth is a patient devourer of heat, but there are places where the heat was so intense, so unnatural, that the stone itself was transformed into a memory of fire. Deep in the Libyan desert, where the sand stretches out in a shimmering, pale yellow sea that meets the horizon with a jagged heat haze, there are fragments of a different world. They are known as desert glass. Translucent, greenish-yellow shards that lie scattered across the dunes like the broken windows of a cathedral that never existed. This is not the work of a volcano. There are no volcanoes for hundreds of miles. This is not the work of lightning, which creates thin, fragile tubes of fused sand called fulgurites. These are massive, solid chunks of silica, fused together by a temperature so high that it turned the desert floor into a liquid pool of glass. The paradox of the glass is one of energy. To create silica glass of this purity, the temperature must exceed 1,600 degrees Celsius. In our modern world, we have seen this happen only a few times in the open air. We saw it in the sands of New Mexico in 1945, when the first atomic device was detonated. The heat of the blast created a new mineral, a green glass called trinitite. The Libyan glass is almost identical in its structure and its purity, but it has been sitting in the desert for nearly 30 million years. Predates our species, predates our ancestors. It predates the very mountains that frame the Sahara. Skeptics will point to the sky. They speak of airbursts, giant meteors that explode in the atmosphere before hitting the ground, creating a downward rush of heat that melts the surface. They point to the Tunguska event in Siberia as a modern example, though that event left no glass, only charred trees. They argue that the Earth is a target in a shooting gallery, and that every few million years, a celestial hammer strikes the ground. It is a clean, scientific explanation that keeps our history safe. It turns a mystery into an accident of astronomy. But the rebuttal is found in the lack of a crater. A meteor large enough to melt hundreds of square miles of desert into glass would leave a scar that not even 30 million years could fully erase. There would be shocked quartz, shattered rock, and a rim of debris that reaches into the stratosphere. In the Libyan desert, there is only the glass. It is a surface event, a localized application of extreme thermal energy that looks less like a falling rock and more like the footprint of a war we have no name for. Consider the possibility that the fifth civilization is not the first to discover the power of the atom. We think of nuclear physics as the ultimate achievement of the 20th century, but it is simply a fundamental property of the universe. If a civilization reached a level of technological maturity millions of years ago, they would have inevitably found the key to the nucleus. And if they were like us, ambitious, territorial, and prone to conflict, they may have used that key to turn their deserts into glass. We are looking at the remnants of a conflict that happened so long ago that the very reasons for the war have dissolved into the vacuum of time. The glass is all that remains of their final, burning moments. The desert is a silent witness, but it is not the only one. If we travel across the ocean to the coast of Western Africa, to the region of Gabon, we find the second part of this nuclear ghost. Here, deep in the uranium mines of Oklo, the Earth holds a secret that is even more unsettling. In the 1970s, technicians measuring the isotope levels of the ore discovered that the uranium-235, the stuff that fuels reactors, was missing. It had been used. It had been burned. The paradox of Oklo is that this process happened 2 billion years ago. 2 billion years ago, the Earth was a world of single-celled organisms, of blue-green algae and a sky without a moon. And yet, in the rock of Oklo, there are 16 distinct sites where nuclear fission occurred in a stable, controlled manner for hundreds of thousands of years. The isotopes found there are the exact chemical signature of spent nuclear fuel. This was not a quick explosion. This was a long-term, regulated generation of power. The skepticism of the academic world is firm. They call it a natural nuclear reactor. They say that groundwater seeped into the uranium-rich soil, acting as a moderator that allowed a chain reaction to begin. When the heat grew too intense, the water turned to steam and the reaction stopped, only to begin again when the ground cooled. It is an elegant theory, a natural machine that functioned with the precision of a Swiss watch. But the rebuttal asks us to look at the waste. Modern nuclear science struggles with the problem of what to do with the toxic byproducts of fission. We build lead-lined casks and bury them in salt mines, hoping they won't leak for 10,000 years. At Oklo, the waste from a 2-billion-year-old reactor has not moved a single inch. It was contained by the surrounding minerals with a perfection that defies our understanding of geology. The geometry of the ore bodies was optimized for the reaction in a way that seems far too convenient to be an accident of erosion. What if Oklo was not a natural fluke, but a waste disposal site? Or perhaps a power station built by the first civilization, the one that lived when the Earth was young and the air was thick with the scent of sulfur? To them, 2 billion years ago, the planet was a different place. The moon was closer, the tides were massive, and the internal heat of the core was a roaring furnace. They built with the grain of the planet's chemistry, using the very ground as their containment vessel. We call it natural because we cannot conceive of a mind that could plan on a scale of 2 billion years. But the evidence is there, cold and radioactive, buried in the red African mud. From the nuclear ghosts of Africa, we turn our gaze toward the water. The Earth is a blue planet, and the oceans are its greatest archives. We live on the dry bits, the islands of rock that poke above the surface, but 70% of our history is submerged. The tides are the breath of the planet, and as the Earth breathes, the shorelines move. Over the last 100,000 years, the sea level has risen and fallen by hundreds of feet. The paradox of the submerged world is found in the continental shelves. These are the shallow areas that surround the land, currently covered by a few hundred feet of water. During the last ice age, these shelves were dry land. They were vast, fertile plains, the most desirable real estate on the planet. If a civilization existed 20,000 years ago, that is where they would have built their cities. Not in the harsh, dry mountains, but on the lush, green coasts. Skeptics argue that while the land was there, the people were not. They tell us that humanity was a collection of nomadic hunters, struggling to survive the cold. They say that the rising sea was a slow process, a gradual crawl that wouldn't have destroyed a civilization, but simply forced it to move inland. They look at the empty seafloor and see nothing but sand and coral. But the rebuttal lies in the ruins we are starting to find. Off the coast of Japan, near the island of Yonaguni, there is a massive stone structure sitting under 80 feet of water. It has terraces, stairways, and perfectly right-angled corners. It is made of the same hard sandstone as the island, but it has been shaped into a monument that looks like a ziggurat. Geologists call it a natural formation, the result of the way the rock fractures. But nature does not create staircases with uniform heights. Nature does not carve channels for water that follow the contours of a terrace. Yonaguni is a ghost of the third civilization, the explorers of the horizon. When the ice melted and the oceans rose, their world was erased in a matter of centuries. Think of the scale of that loss. Our modern civilization is concentrated on the coasts. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai. If the sea level rose by 300 feet tomorrow, our entire history would be underwater within a lifetime. The salt would eat the steel, the tides would grind the concrete into pebbles, and the silt would cover everything in a thick, suffocating blanket of mud. In 10,000 years, a diver would look at the ruins of Manhattan and see nothing but natural stone formations. The earth uses the ocean as a cleaning fluid. It washes the continents, scrubbing away the evidence of those who lived too close to the edge. There are legends of lost lands, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu, Sundaland. We treat them as myths, as stories we tell to explain the emptiness of the horizon. But a myth is often just a memory that has lost its detail. It is the oral record of a catastrophe that was so vast it could only be preserved in the language of the divine. The third civilization didn't sink because of a sin or a curse. They sank because the earth shifted its weight, and the water claimed what had always belonged to it. The investigation now takes us to the most delicate and most enduring archive, the sky. We think of the solar system as a clockwork mechanism, a series of rocks spinning around a ball of fire. But there are details in that clockwork that are too precise, too accidental to be ignored. The paradox of the moon is the most striking. The moon is exactly the right size and at exactly the right distance to perfectly cover the disk of the sun during an eclipse. This is a mathematical impossibility. The sun is 400 times larger than the moon, but it is also 400 times further away. This alignment allows us to see the solar corona, to study the physics of stars, and to measure the curvature of space-time. No other planet in our solar system has a moon that fits its sun so perfectly. Skeptics call it a coincidence. They say that in a universe of billions of stars, the impossible will happen eventually. They point out that the moon is slowly moving away from the Earth, and that in a few million years, the eclipse will no longer be perfect. We just happen to be living at the right time to see it. It is the anthropic principle, the idea that the universe looks the way it does because if it didn't, we wouldn't be here to see it. But the rebuttal is found in the ancient monuments that are keyed to this specific coincidence. Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, the temples of the Maya, they are all built to track the movements of a moon that should not be where it is. Some researchers, looking at the mass and the orbit of the moon, have suggested it is not a natural body at all, but a piece of anomalous engineering. It is too light for its size. It rings like a bell when struck by a meteor. Its orbit is too circular, too stable. Imagine the fourth civilization, the masters of the weight. If you could move a 100-ton block of granite with sound, could you move a moon? If you understood the resonance of gravity, could you park a celestial body in an orbit that serves as a permanent, unchanging clock for the planet below? Perhaps the moon is the greatest monument ever built, a lighthouse in the dark of space, placed there to ensure that the fifth civilization would eventually look up and start asking questions. It is a piece of hardware that has survived every erasure, every ice age, and every flood. It is the only thing the Earth cannot reach. As we bring these threads together, the unifying theory begins to emerge. We are not just looking at a series of lost cultures. We are looking at a single, repeating process. The Earth is a massive biological and geological processor. It takes energy from the sun and the core, and it uses it to create complexity. It grows civilizations like a tree grows leaves. And like a tree, the Earth has seasons. The first civilization was the root, the chemical foundation, the masters of the deep heat. The second was the trunk, the biological engineers who wrote the code of life. The third was the branch, the explorers who mapped the world and the stars. The fourth was the flower, the architects of the stone and the gravity who built for eternity. And we are the fifth, the fruit. We are the ones who carry the seeds of the next world, even as we consume the resources of the current one. The so what of this story is not a warning of doom, but a call to perspective. We live in a world that is obsessed with the immediate. We worry about next year, next decade, next century. But the Earth is thinking in millions of years. When we realize that we are the fifth, our struggles feel different. Our wars, our economies, our technologies, they are all temporary. They are the foam on the surface of a deep, dark ocean. The modern relevance of this mystery is found in our own footprint. We are currently creating the evidence for the sixth civilization. We are leaving behind a layer of plastic that will eventually become a strange synthetic vein in the rock. We are leaving behind radioactive isotopes that will glow in the dark of the deep earth for 10,000 generations. We are the first civilization to change the chemistry of the entire planet in such a short time. We are making ourselves loud, so that the erasure will have to work harder to silence us. But the earth will silence us. Not out of malice, but out of necessity. The plates will continue to move. The sun will continue to age. The ice will return, or the heat will rise until the oceans boil. This is the rhythm of the house. We can fight it, or we can learn to move with it. The true success of a civilization is not how long it lasts, but how much it understands while it is here. As the sun sets on our own era, we can look at the evidence that was almost erased and find a strange kind of comfort. We are part of a grand tradition. We are not a mistake of nature, but a recurring feature of the planet. The ghosts of the four civilizations are all around us, in the glass of the desert, the stones of the mountains, the maps of the sea, and the code in our veins. They are cheering us on, watching to see what we do with our spark of fire before the eraser comes for us too. The earth is heavy, and the time is deep. But in the quiet moments, when the wind dies down and the hum of the city fades, you can feel the connection. You can feel the weight of the billions who came before you and the potential of the billions who will come after. We are the fifth civilization, and we are finally beginning to see the shape of the world we inhabit. The story of the Forgotten Earth is your story. It is the history of your home, written in a language of stone and light. As we close this chapter, do not look at the ground as dirt. Look at it as a manuscript. Every pebble is a word, every mountain is a page, and you are the reader. Wait for the next heartbeat of the planet. Listen to the wind. Watch the shadows. The sixth civilization is already waiting in the wings, and they will be looking for you. To truly understand the thoroughness of the erasure, we must go to the places where the earth is most violent. We must travel to the deep, dark gashes in the ocean floor, the subduction zones. This is where the world eats itself. If you could descend into the Mariana Trench, past the point where the light of the sun becomes a forgotten dream, you would find yourself at the edge of the Great Grinder. Here, the massive plates of the crust are being forced downward, sliding under the continents and sinking back into the white-hot mantle. It is a slow, agonizing process. The rock groans and snaps, sending tremors through the water that can be felt 1,000 miles away. Think about the physical reality of this process. Imagine a city, any city. Imagine the sprawling streets of London or the high glass towers of Dubai. If that city were sitting on a plate destined for subduction, it would not just be buried. It would be dragged into the furnace. The steel would melt. The concrete would be crushed into a fine powder and then cooked into new minerals. The very memories of the people who lived there, captured in their books and their hard drives, would be reduced to their constituent atoms. The earth takes the complexity of a civilization and turns it into fuel for its internal fires. It is a perfect, closed-loop system of recycling that leaves no scrap behind. The paradox of the seabed is that it is the youngest part of the planet. While the continents have rocks that are billions of years old, the floor of the ocean is rarely older than 200 million years. It is constantly being renewed, constantly being wiped clean. This means that if the first, second, or third civilizations were maritime cultures, as we are, the vast majority of their physical presence has already been consumed by the mantle. We are looking for the history of a house while standing on a floor that was replaced only yesterday. Skeptics of deep-time civilizations often point to this lack of physical ruins as proof of absence. They say that if a global culture had existed, their presence would be everywhere. They look at the empty silt of the deep ocean and see nothing but an untouched wilderness. They argue that the tectonic cycle is too slow to hide everything, that surely some fragment of a city would survive the descent. But the rebuttal is found in the chemistry of the volcanoes. When a tectonic plate sinks into the mantle, it doesn't just disappear. It melts and eventually rises back to the surface as lava. In recent decades, geochemists have found strange anomalies in the lava of certain volcanic chains. They find traces of isotopes and refined metals, niobium, tungsten, and rare earth elements, in ratios that are difficult to explain through natural geological sorting. It is as if the mantle is spitting back the refined leftovers of a world it ate 100 million years ago. We are literally building our modern world on the recycled slag of the fourth civilization. The very iron in your blood might have once been part of a structural beam in a city that saw a different moon. Now, consider the texture of the high-altitude glaciers, the great white sandpaper of the planet. As the ice moves, it does not just sit on the rock. It grinds. It carries boulders the size of houses and uses them to scour the landscape, erasing the hills and leveling the valleys. During the Great Ice Ages, these glaciers covered nearly 1/3 of the Earth's surface. They are the great levelers. Any monument, any pyramid, any skyscraper caught in the path of a mile-high wall of ice is reduced to glacial flour, a fine, gray silt that washes into the sea. The weight of the ice is so great that it actually causes the Earth to breathe and shift its weight. When the ice melts, the land rises back up, a process that takes thousands of years. This shifting and grinding is the Earth's way of exfoliating its skin, rubbing away the blemishes of the past to make way for the new. When we look at the smooth, polished surfaces of the Canadian Shield or the Scandinavian mountains, we aren't looking at a natural landscape. We are looking at a crime scene where the evidence has been scrubbed away with a force that defies human imagination. But the erasure is never quite 100%. There are pockets of the world that the ice didn't reach and the subduction zones didn't touch. These are the stagnant zones, the deep hearts of the continents where the rock has remained undisturbed for 1 billion years. And it is here, in the cold, dry silence of the deep crust, that we find the most haunting paradox of all, the micro-artifacts. In the Ural Mountains of Russia, in layers of silt dated to the Pleistocene, about 100,000 years ago, gold miners found something that nearly paralyzed the scientific community. They were tiny objects, ranging from 3 centimeters down to a fraction of a millimeter. They were spirals, coils, and shafts, made of copper, tungsten, and molybdenum. Under a microscope, they revealed a level of engineering that we only achieved in the late 20th century. They were nanotechnology. The paradox is undeniable. These were not primitive tools. They were components of something complex, perhaps sensors, perhaps parts of a communication network. And they were found in undisturbed soil, deep beneath the reach of any modern industrial activity. The geometry of these objects is so precise, their composition so specific, that they cannot be dismissed as natural formations. Molybdenum does not form into perfect spirals in the mud. The skepticism followed the usual patterns. Claims of industrial contamination from nearby mines were investigated but fell apart when the objects were found in areas miles away from any modern site, buried under layers of ancient, compacted earth. Others suggested they were the remains of fallen satellites, but the geological strata they were embedded in predated the space age by 100 millennia. The rebuttal is a chilling realization. If we are finding nanotechnology from 100,000 years ago, then the third or fourth civilization didn't just have steam or electricity. They had mastered the very fabric of matter. They were operating at a scale that we are only now beginning to explore. And yet, of their entire world, their cities, their ships, their art, the only things that survived the Great Grind were these tiny, microscopic whispers of metal. It forces us to ask, what will be left of us? Our plastic will crumble. Our satellites will fall and burn. Perhaps in 1,000,000 years, the only evidence of our existence will be a few microscopic silicon chips buried in a layer of mud that used to be California. This brings us to the texture of the air itself. We think of the atmosphere as a void, but it is a chemical record. Every breath we take is a mixture of gases that have been cycled through the lungs of every living thing for billions of years. But there are moments in the deep past where the air was wrong. There is a period in the geological record known as the Permian-Triassic boundary. It was the greatest extinction in the history of the planet. Over 90% of all species vanished. The Earth nearly became a dead rock. We are told this was caused by massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia, which released CO2 and warmed the planet. But the chemical signature of that time is strange. There is a sudden, violent spike in certain toxins that don't usually accompany volcanic activity in such quantities. It looks like the signature of a planetary-scale industrial collapse. Imagine the fifth civilization's end. If we were to go extinct tomorrow, our chemical legacy would be a thin layer of strange molecules in the soil and a sudden shift in the carbon isotopes. To a geologist 10 million years from now, it wouldn't look like a war or a famine. It would look like a natural spike in the data. They would see a moment where the Earth's chemistry went haywire, and then, after a few thousand years, returned to a new normal. They would call it the Anthropocene extinction event and attribute it to a change in ocean currents or a solar flare. They would never suspect that the spike was caused by billions of people living in heated houses and driving metal machines. The unifying theory of the forgotten Earth suggests that the planet is not a passive stage for life, but an active participant in its own evolution. The Earth wants to create complexity, but it also knows how to manage it. Like a gardener who prunes a tree to keep it healthy, the Earth allows civilizations to rise, to reach a certain level of mastery, and then it resets the system. It uses the ice, the fire, and the tides to clear the ground for the next experiment. We are the fifth civilization to be part of this experiment. The first, the masters of the deep heat, gave the planet its chemical stability. The second, the masters of the code, filled the world with the potential of life. The third, the masters of the horizon, connected the continents. The fourth, the masters of the stone, built the foundations. And we, the masters of the spark, have brought the light. Each one has built upon the ghosts of the last, using the recycled materials and the dormant genetic instructions left behind. But what is the so what? Why does it matter that we are the fifth? It matters because it changes the way we see our place in time. Modern humanity suffers from a kind of chronological narcissism. We think we are the end of history. We think our problems are unique, our achievements are unparalleled, and our destiny is the stars. But when you realize you are part of a cycle, you begin to see that our progress is just a season. It gives us a profound sense of humility, but also a strange kind of hope. If we were the first, the pressure to succeed would be overwhelming. If we fail, the experiment of intelligence fails forever. But if we are the fifth, it means the experiment is resilient. It means that even if we fail, if we burn our atmosphere or poison our oceans, the Earth will simply wait. It will wait 1,000,000 years or 10 million or 50. It will grind our ruins into dust, wash the air clean with rain, and then it will start again. The sixth civilization will rise, and they will find our tiny metal spirals in the mud, and they will wonder who the giants were that lived before them. The modern relevance of this mystery is a reminder that we are not separate from the Earth. We are a biological expression of the planet's will. Our technology is not artificial. It is as natural as a bird's nest or a beehive. It is simply the current way the Earth is processing energy and information. When we look at the climate crisis or the depletion of resources, we aren't saving the planet. The planet will be fine. It has survived much worse than us. We are trying to save our season. We are trying to stay the hand of the eraser for just a few more centuries. The philosophical outro of our story begins with a look at the stars. When we look up at the night sky, we are looking into the deep past. The light we see has traveled for thousands of years to reach our eyes. We are literally seeing the universe as it used to be. The Earth is the same. When you look at a mountain or a canyon, you aren't looking at a thing. You are looking at a process. You are looking at time made visible. The weight of deep time is not meant to crush us, but to ground us. It reminds us that our lives, though short, are part of a lineage that is as old as the stars. We are the current guardians of the flame. We are the ones who get to walk in the sun, to breathe the air, and to ask the questions. We are the voice of the Earth at this particular moment in its long, long life. Think about the tactile details of your world one last time. The cold, smooth surface of a river stone. The smell of damp earth after a summer rain. The vibration of the ground when a train passes by. These are not just sensory experiences. They are connections to the 4 civilizations that came before. The stone was shaped by the tides they navigated. The earth was fertilized by the life they engineered. The vibration is a reminder of the gravity they mastered. We are the 5th, and we are not alone. The evidence was almost erased, but the echoes are everywhere. They are in the myths we tell, the dreams we have, and the anomalies we find in the dark. They are a promise that the story continues, that the cycle will turn again, and that the earth will never forget what it has learned. As the shadows of the 5th sunset grow longer, we don't have to be afraid. The darkness is just the preparation for a new dawn. The machine of erasure is also a machine of creation. And as long as there is a single grain of sand, a single drop of water, and a single spark of curiosity, the memory of the forgotten earth will endure. We have reached the end of this particular journey, but the road of deep time is infinite. Look at the world with the eyes of a traveler who has seen the rise and fall of empires. Be kind to the earth, for it is your mother and your grave. And be kind to each other, for you are all passengers on a very old, very beautiful, and very mysterious ship. The 5th civilization is waking up. The sixth is waiting, and the earth continues to turn, silent and patient, holding its secrets in the deep places, waiting for the next heartbeat to begin. Thank you for listening to the echoes of the past. If you have felt the weight of the years and the wonder of the mystery, then you have understood the true nature of our home. Join us again as we explore the hidden corners of the forgotten earth. The story is never truly over. It is only waiting to be rediscovered. Stay curious, stay humble, and always look beneath the surface. To truly grasp the magnitude of this erasure, one must look beyond the visible spectrum and turn toward the most invisible armor of our planet, its magnetic field. We are accustomed to thinking of magnetism as a mere navigational tool, a compass needle pointing north. But for the planet, the magnetic field is its memory, its private flight recorder. Every few 100,000 years, the Earth's poles swap places. North becomes south, and south becomes north. In the moments of this reversal, the planet's shield weakens and cosmic radiation pours onto the surface, leaving a permanent scar in the structure of cooling lava and in the very chemistry of life itself. In this lies another paradox that researchers are only beginning to comprehend. If we look at the graph of magnetic inversions over the last few 100 million years, we see a strange regularity. At times, these reversals occur with a haunting precision, almost as if on a schedule. To the skeptic, these are merely chaotic movements of liquid iron in the planet's core, random fluctuations of a geodynamo. But for those searching for the traces of the fourth or third civilizations, this looks like something else entirely, a periodic system reset. Imagine the magnetic field as a hard drive. When the accumulated information, the electromagnetic noise of cities, the satellite signals, the vibrations of global networks, begins to threaten the stability of planetary processes, the Earth simply presses the reset button. The poles shift, the radiation wipes the delicate electronic circuits, and everything begins again with a clean slate. We are the fifth civilization, living in a period of unnaturally long calm. We enjoy the stability of this magnetic shield, unaware that this silence is the prelude to a storm that will erase our digital world as effectively as the ice erased the cities of stone. The rebuttal to the theory of random magnetic inversions is found in the orientation of ancient monuments. We find temples and pyramids that today appear slightly out of alignment with the true north. Archaeologists call these errors made by ancient builders the inaccuracy of primitive tools. But if you overlay these site plans onto a map of the magnetic fields of the past, it becomes clear that they were perfectly aligned with the poles as they existed tens of thousands of years ago. The masters of the stone, the fourth civilization, knew of the coming reversal. They built their cities like giant anchors, capable of weathering the magnetic chaos and preserving a sense of direction for those who would come after. Now, let us turn to the thinnest and most fragile archive: information. We, the representatives of the fifth civilization, take immense pride in our information age. We have digitized everything: our knowledge, our art, our faces. It seems to us that this will ensure our immortality. But in the context of deep time, our world is the most ghostly of all. A stone block will stand for 1,000,000 years. A bone needle in a cave can survive for 100 millennia. But what becomes of our data? Magnetic disks will demagnetize in decades. Optical media will cloud and crumble. Servers, requiring constant cooling and power, will turn into heaps of rusted plastic within a single generation after the spark of electricity vanishes. We are the first civilization that has decided to store its history in the most ephemeral format possible. We are writing on water. If humanity vanished tomorrow, within 1,000 years, not a single bit of data from our information age would remain. Future archaeologists might find our concrete foundations and our plastic bottles, but they will never know our names, never hear our music, and never understand our language. This is the paradox of the digital void. Skeptics argue that if high-tech civilizations had existed before us, we would find their equivalents of the internet or their methods of data transmission. But we are looking for radio waves where perhaps gravitational modulation or crystal resonance was used. The third civilization, the masters of the horizon, might have used the planet's ionosphere itself as a giant biocomputer. Their data was woven into the Schumann resonance, into the very low-frequency vibration of the Earth that we mistake today for natural background noise. The reaction to this suggestion is often one of irony. Modern science is accustomed to believing only in what can be touched or measured with a ruler. But can one measure thoughts that were erased a million years ago? The rebuttal to this skepticism lies in the very structure of our consciousness. Why are we so sensitive to certain rhythms? Why does the quiet hum of the planet cause us a sense of peace, or conversely, an inexplicable anxiety? Perhaps our subconscious is attempting to download data from an archive that was closed to us hundreds of centuries ago. We carry within ourselves receivers tuned to the frequencies of civilizations whose cities long ago turned to sand. Look at the texture of the very soil upon which we stand. It contains another, darker aspect of the erasure. In biology, there is the concept of diversity crises. Every few million years, the number of species on the planet sharply decreases, and then just as sharply increases. We call these evolutionary leaps. But look at this through the eyes of a planetary engineer. When a garden becomes overgrown with weeds, the gardener prunes it. When a civilization, perhaps the second or third, began to alter the biosphere too heavily for its own needs, disrupting the balance, the Earth initiated a biological reset. We find in the paleontological record the remains of creatures that seem to us like absurd mistakes of nature. Giant insects with wingspans of a meter, creatures with 5 eyes and jaws working in 3 planes. But what if these were not mistakes? What if they were biotools of the second civilization, created for specific tasks, to filter the atmosphere or process minerals? When their creators departed, these tools became useless and died out, leaving us in bewilderment at their strange anatomy. We, the fifth civilization, are doing the same right now. We create GMOs, we clone, we edit the genome. A million years from now, our domestic animals and modified grains will seem to future archaeologists like inexplicable monsters that appeared from nowhere. The unified theory of the 5 civilizations brings us to a final realization. We are not just accidental passers-by. We are part of the maturation process of the Earth itself. The first civilization was the fire in the depths. The second was the green in the ocean. The third was the wind in the sails. The fourth was the echo in the stone. And we are the consciousness of this process. We are the ones who have begun to notice the seams in the fabric of reality. Why is this important now in our age of speed and anxiety? Because understanding the cycles gives us the right to peace. We are so afraid of the end of the world, so afraid of climate change and technological collapses. But the Earth has seen the end of the world 4 times already. It has seen mountains melt and oceans freeze. And each time, life returned, becoming more complex and more wise. We cannot destroy the planet. We can only make it uninhabitable for our current season. And if we do not learn to listen to the whispers of those who were here before us, we will simply become another layer in the geological cake. The meaning of our existence, perhaps, lies not in building an empire that will stand forever, but in passing the baton forward. It lies in leaving behind not just plastic and radiation, but a certain deep resonance that will help the 6th civilization avoid our mistakes. We are the witnesses of the great erasure, and our task is to read at least a few words from this burned book before the page turns once more. Observe the details of your surroundings today. Notice how the light falls on the rough surface of a wall, how the dust smells after rain, how the earth trembles under the weight of the city. All of this is part of a vast, living organism that breathes with a frequency of millions of years. You are not separate from this story. Your body consists of atoms that were once part of the oceans of the second civilization and the stones of the fourth. You are living proof that nothing vanishes without a trace. It only changes form. As you listen to this narrative, allow yourself to sink into this flow. Feel time slowing down. Your worries, your fears, your plans, they are tiny against the backdrop of the Earth's deep time. But your ability to feel this connection, that is immense. This is the spark we brought into this cycle, the spark of awareness. We are the fifth civilization. We stand on the shoulders of giants whose names were erased by wind and water. But their blood flows in our veins. Their stones lie in the foundations of our homes, and their stars shine for us at night. We are not the first, and we are not the last. We are part of an eternal dance between memory and oblivion. And in this dance is hidden the greatest beauty that the forgotten earth can offer. The story continues. It is being written right now, beneath your feet, in every movement of the tectonic plates and in every beat of your heart. Be worthy of this legacy. Listen for the echo. Remember the erasure. And know this, the earth never truly forgets. It is simply waiting for you to be ready to hear the truth. Our journey into the depths of time comes to an end, but this is only the conclusion of a single chapter. Ahead lie an infinite number of pages, buried beneath the weight of centuries. Thank you for walking this path with us, here on the forgotten earth. May the silence of deep time bring you clarity, and the awareness of cycles bring you wisdom. Until the next beat of the planetary heart. The world is vast, time is deep, and the truth is always nearby, right beneath your feet. Do not fear the darkness of the past. Within it, the light of the future is born.